Hi, it's Hope and welcome to the video. This, as you can tell, is going to be my worst books, well, worst slash most disappointing books of 2021. Now, just because these books are my worst slash most disappointing doesn't mean they aren't good books. I will first say that. And also, just because these books are on this list does not mean that you shouldn't read them, or there's honestly a few books on this list that I might try to give a second chance at some point, or there's one book that I'm debating should I continue the series. So yeah, and just saying that doesn't mean these are bad. I'm going to briefly go through these. These are in no particular order. The first book I mentioned, it isn't more disappointing than the last book I mentioned, and all that. These are kind of just like, these are ones that when I think about them, I'm like, I was disappointed by that book, or I didn't like that book. Some of these I remember the ratings for, some of them I don't, so I'll just like let you know as that kind of happens. So also some of these one of these I don't remember the author. And that first book is Rise of the Red Hand by Olivia something. I remember the first name was Olivia. And this is like a dystopian sci-fi where it's like we follow a girl who ends up like, she's in like there's like the wastelands of this place. And that's pretty much all I remember. So of course it's kind of on the worst book. I gave this book 2 stars, which I have only ever given out one other 2 stars, which is the next book I mentioned. I just did not like Rise of the Red Hand. This was the Avengers Initiative Reading Challenge group book for May. Yes, for May. And this book was so bad that I wanted to DNF it. But I needed to read it to fit prompts on like the boards for that reading challenge, and also I didn't want to DNF 2 books from that group in a row. I also am not including DNFs because I wouldn't have read the whole story, therefore I cannot say if it's the worst, if it's the worst book of the year slash most disappointing, because I didn't finish it. So it could have gotten amazing. Also, a lot of the DNFs I did this year are ones that I might reread or try to. Some of them yes, some of them no. So yeah, I just like, I don't remember the characters. I didn't like the characters. I just didn't like the atmosphere. I just didn't like the writing. I didn't like really anything about it. This book I will say is probably the worst, in all honesty. The next book is Last by Andrew Sean Greer, and this essentially we follow what, like 40-year-old Arthur Less, as he is doing like he's an author and he's like doing these like book things throughout like the world, solely to avoid his ex's wedding that he was invited to. And this I also gave 2 stars. This was for a book club, like a queer book club that I was in that unfortunately has disbanded. But I just didn't like this. I could be because it was an adult novel and I didn't connect with the character because he was a 40-year-old gay man. And then also I just like didn't really like the way it was written. It was like written in 3rd person, and it is revealed who the person is. But like I was like, if it would have been written in 1st person with like of the character, it might have been a lot better. Also, it kind of like, it jumped around a little too much, and I just like the backstory, like the flashbacks weren't like, it was hard to tell what was a flashback, what was current time. And also could be because I read this over the span of like 6 weeks, again, for that book club. That made me not like it as much, but yeah. The next book on this list is the only book that I own, and that is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. Essentially, I read this book. Well, actually, first I will mention what it's about. Essentially, there's this circus called the Night that like shows up at night at random places. It's there for an unbeknownst amount of time and then disappears and moves on to the next place. And we have these two magicians that are in this like competition that's involving around things. And then like, I read this last month and I don't really remember that much. This I gave 2.5 stars. I originally in March of 2020 DNF'd this book. But then I gave it a second chance in December and it was a 2.5 stars. I didn't like the writing. The characters were mediocre. I don't think I like books that aren't in like one, like a linear timeline. These ones are kind of like, they'll be like 1 year, we'll see, and then we'll go back like 10 years, and we'll go forward 12 years, and we'll go back a year. So it's just like you have to piece everything together, and I just didn't like that. Yeah, I'm also gonna be unhauling this book whenever I do an unhaul. The next book is Ava Truth and Trickery by Analeigh Forth, and this one was more of like a disappointing than a worst, because I did give it 3.5 stars, I believe. But essentially in this book we have a human girl that ends up getting taken to the Fey lands because of like a is it like a prophecy or something? And this book I was promised to be, it was like almost like published and like promoted as like a kind of a book similar to A Court of Thorns and Roses, which is like one of my favorite series of all time, as well as it's meant to be like a reverse harem. And I was disappointed because there was no character development, for one. It did give those like ACOTAR vibes, but like honestly at the same time not. I wish it would have been like, it was also labeled as like new adult, and I'm like, you could have done more. And I understand it's only the first book in a series, but it's just like, you could have given me a little bit more. And this is the one that I said that I'm like, I'm debating if I want to pick up the next book, because I do remember enough to be able to pick up the second book, because I think it's supposed to come out within the next like few months or something. But I'm not sure, and I probably won't decide that until the future. I also know that it will be on Kindle Unlimited, so like I won't be using my own money to buy it. I'll just be like reading it through that if I do. The next book is We Unleash the Merciless Storm by Tehlor K. Mejia, and this is the second book in the We Set the Dark on Fire series, where essentially we are in like this dystopian-ish world where essentially like we follow, I cannot even remember the main character's name, and she graduates from this like school which essentially is to teach the young woman of the country how to be a wife. And in this world, like in this setting, like wealthy men have two wives, one to do like the bookkeeping and like the planning and like all of that, and then the other one to be more of like the partner, the mother of their children and all of that. I really enjoyed the first book. I gave that first book like a 4-star, and then I think I gave book 2 a 3-star because I literally, there was like, not that there wasn't a use, but I couldn't retain any of the plot. I literally could not tell you one thing that happens in book 2. I could tell you a few things that happens in book 1. Could not tell you a single thing that happened in book 2. It's also sapphic, which also like made me disappointed, because I felt like the two main characters, there was a bit of chemistry, but there could have been more. And I don't really have much thoughts about this because I don't really remember that much more. The next book is We Freed the Stars by Faizal. And again, this is kind of a similar thing to We Unleash the Merciless Storm. Is I really liked the first book, and then the second book I just didn't like. This essentially we follow, again, I cannot remember the main character's name. Essentially she is a like hunter for her village, and then ends up going to this place to find like this magic that's gonna like save the lands or something. And then the second book I literally could not, again, I couldn't tell you a single thing. I think it's just because I don't know. I honestly couldn't tell you even why I can't remember any things. It was also, this series was supposed to be like enemies to lovers, and honestly, it wasn't. And I think that's what also like made me really not like it, is if you're gonna pitch a book as something, actually deliver through with it. It doesn't have to be like fully delivered through, but even like partially of like, oh, you're saying it's enemies to lovers. Okay, they can't be instantly liking each other halfway through book 1 and then whatever the fuck they were in book 2. The one thing I remember from book 2 is there was the one bed trope. That is literally it. Now, these next ones were like, they're not like bad, like they're not the worst books, they're not the most disappointing, it's more like they're the most confusing, which is why they're on this list, and that is Truthwitch and Windwitch by Susan Dennard, the first 2 books in the Witchland series. I also read part of Sightwitch, which is the 2.5 novella, so I also read that, but I DNF'd that, so I'm not counting that on this list. But this essentially, we follow Safi, who is a Truthwitch, and Truthwitches are very rare, and they're sought after by the kind of rulers of these lands. Essentially, these lands are in like at war or something, or like they're going to be at war because there's a treaty that was like about to be done or something, like ended. And so Safi ends up getting having to go on the run for reasons, and I just didn't understand what was going on. I didn't understand the world. I didn't understand the lore. And I think it is because I literally picked these up solely because Jade from JD Ray Reads was doing a like read-along with these in the beginning, in the earlier half of 2021, and I joined in, and I felt like I shouldn't have, because I didn't understand enough. I kind of jumped in head first, not knowing much, and I think that's what really did it, of like, I jumped in too soon. I should have like waited a little bit, and these are ones that I do think maybe once the entire series is finished, I might pick it up. I think there's one more book to be released in 2022 maybe, so maybe like 2023 I might like try it again. I'm not for certain, but it is one that I'd like to maybe retry. The next book is Cross Spaces by multiple authors. This is essentially a like anthology of sci-fi, kind of like almost like novellas. And this, apparently I found out that I don't like anthology collections. I'm also like iffy with sci-fi, so that's probably why. Is if it would have been like a fantasy or a romance anthology, I might have liked it more. But I can't remember how many stories it is or how many authors, but they're all set in space. Some of the stories were really good. Some of the stories were crap. And I think I ended up giving this like a 3-star. And again, I think it's just because it was an anthology, and it was like, because there was some stories, the ones that I really liked, I wanted more. But there wasn't any more, because then you moved on to the next. And I think that is just, I don't like anthologies. The next book is Winter by Audrey Gray, and this is like a fantasy with fae, and essentially we follow a girl named Summer who ends up like stumbling into the Fae lands and ends up having to attend the Evermore Academy as like a because like she stepped into their land, so now she's being punished. And I don't remember anything. I read this in March. To be fair, I kind of maybe blame that I read like half the book in the ER. So like maybe that's why I didn't like it as much. I associated it with being in the ER and having to get a COVID test. So yeah, this, I didn't like our main character at all. The love interest, I would only reread this book and continue the next book for the love interest in honesty, but I'm like, I could pick up 100 other books and have a very similar love interest. And also, to continue on with this series, I would have to reread the first book, and I like don't want to do that. That idea just makes me go like, how about no? And the final book that was a disappointing read was Wildcard by Marie Lu, which is the second book in the Warcross duology. And why I didn't really like Wildcard is, well, first of all, Warcross is like about this video game named Warcross, and we follow Amika, who she's a hacker for the game, and when she gets caught hacking, she ends up getting hired by the like creator of the game to like help find other people hacking into the game and all that. And the second book was honestly kind of unnecessary because I just didn't like it, in all honesty. I hate how, like, for part of the book, the villain was a love interest, which, don't get me wrong, I like that, but I'm like, I don't like how you were the villain. I literally also can't remember anything really for this. And, like, I really liked the first one, but the second one, I just, like, it was disappointing. I wanted more from it, and I just didn't have it, and yeah, that's, like, pretty much it. Like, I don't have anything else really to say. So those were I don't even know how many, is it 11 books on this list that were, like, worst/disappointing? A lot of them were more or less disappointing, in all honesty. But let me know what your least favorite book of the year is, or a book that was disappointing, or your thoughts on these books, because I'd love to hear them. I will also be posting my best books of 2021 video in a few days after posting this. I'm literally going to be filming it right after this. And that one I'm much more excited to film and much more excited to talk about the books. So I really hope you enjoyed this video, and bye!